This is gonna sound like one of those crazy, this couldn't have actually happened stories, but I swear it's 100% true. I know some of you are gonna call this a weird hallucination or the product of sleep deprivation, but I can't explain it. I've been driving for work every day for the last 4 years, and I've seen some strange things, but nothing compares to what happened to me that night in the rural stretches of northern Illinois. So, I'm not a truck driver, but I do a lot of driving for work. I travel long distances for my job as a technician for various retail stores. For context, the area I was in that night was between a small town called Rockford and a place called Freeport. It's a roughly 250-mile stretch of farmland with little to no civilization between the towns. Picture endless flat fields on either side of you, with just the highway stretching out into the dark. It's not a very comforting sight on any given night, but when you add in bad weather, things get downright unsettling. I had just left Rockford after finishing up at one of our stores, and the weather was already starting to turn sour. It had been a long day, 14 hours of work, and I was tired, but I had to make the drive home. The wind was picking up, and the skies were turning that ominous shade of gray. The kind you know means a storm is brewing. I called my wife to give her a heads up about the weather, especially since I was going through some pretty rural areas. I told her there was a thunderstorm warning in effect, and with the way the clouds were looking, it was definitely going to be a rough drive. I promised to check in once I got to a safer spot. I'd stopped for some coffee and a quick bite before I hit the road, trying to stay awake and alert. I knew the next couple of hours were going to be pretty intense, especially with the weather. And if you've ever driven through farmland at night, well, you know it can feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, and that alone can mess with your head. Add a storm into the mix, and it gets even creepier. So, about 30 miles into the farmland, that's when the first strange thing happened. The hail started. It wasn't huge, but it was coming down fast and hard. Being a Midwest native, I've seen my fair share of storms, and when hail starts in the middle of the summer, it's never a good sign. It's usually a sign that the storm is about to intensify, and that's exactly what was happening. I pulled over to the side of the road. The wind was howling, and I could feel the truck rocking a bit. It was completely dark out here, and I couldn't see any other cars or lights, just me and the storm. I turned off the engine and rolled down the passenger window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the storm as it got closer. I had a big floodlight flashlight with me. I keep it in the truck for work, since I often have to look into industrial buildings or ceilings that need a good light source to really see. I shone the light out into the night, scanning the horizon for any sign of the storm picking up. The wind was whipping the rain sideways, but there was nothing. No flashes of lightning, no dark clouds swirling in any direction, just more darkness. But then, something caught my eye. I turned my head towards the driver's side window, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, just outside my window, was a man. His face was pressed up against the glass, his eyes sunken deep into his skull, and a grin spread across his face from ear to ear. And when I say grin, I mean it was disturbing, like something out of a horror movie. His teeth were crooked and uneven, almost like they were too big for his mouth. Like a Cheshire cat smile, but with a twisted, sinister edge to it. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. He didn't move, just stood there, grinning at me, his face inches from the glass. I've never experienced fear like that in my life. Just this intense, suffocating dread. I'm not even sure how long I stared at him. I don't know if it was a second or a minute. It felt like an eternity. Then, without warning, the man raised his hand slowly, pressing his palm against the window. I could hear the faint sound of his breath fogging up the glass. But it wasn't just his breath. It was like he was trying to communicate through the fog, drawing something with his fingers. Slowly, methodically, he started to draw shapes. It was hard to make out what exactly it was. It wasn't like any normal shape, more like chaotic lines moving in erratic patterns that didn't make sense. And the whole time, that grin stayed there, frozen, almost like he was mocking me with it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam the truck into drive and get out of there, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't move. It was like I was frozen, stuck in this nightmare, unable to break free. The more I stared at him, the more I could feel the air growing colder around me. The man's presence felt unnatural, like he didn't belong in the world I was in. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he wiped the fog off the window with his sleeve, and in a flash, he was gone. One moment he was standing there, drawing on the glass, and the next, the space outside my truck was empty. I snapped out of my daze and floored it, tearing down the road, not even looking in the rearview mirror. I didn't care if there was another car or if I was speeding. I just needed to get away from that place. Once I'd gotten to a safer area, I pulled off at the first gas station I could find. I was shaking. I didn't want to freak out my wife, so I didn't tell her anything about the man. But I did tell her about the storm and the hail. I needed to get the image of that man out of my head, so I checked the truck's cameras. We have cameras running all the time for insurance and security purposes, so I thought maybe something would show up on them. I pulled the SD card and checked the footage. I watched it. Nothing. There was no trace of that man. No one walking by my truck. No strange figures in the background. No movement at all that could explain what I saw. It was like he wasn't even there. I didn't know what to think. Could I have been hallucinating from exhaustion? I'd been awake for a long time, but I'd driven through worse conditions before, and I've never seen anything like that. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I still drive to work, but I can't bring myself to go through that stretch of highway after dark. If I have to go to Rockford or Freeport again, I'll make sure it's during the day. I'm not saying I'm convinced it was something paranormal, but I can't explain what happened. The only thing I know for sure is that it felt real. Too real to ignore. A few things have been running through my mind since then. Was it my mind playing tricks on me because of fatigue? Could it have been some kind of weird optical illusion? Something to do with the rain and hail? But there's just no way I could have imagined that grin. It was too vivid, too clear. And even though the cameras didn't pick up anything, I know what I saw. Anyway, that's my story. I'm not sure what happened out there, but I don't drive through that stretch at night anymore. I'll take the long way around if I have to. I just can't shake the feeling that whatever it was something I wasn't supposed to see. I told this story before, but one time I was driving with my girlfriend through Wisconsin on the way back home. It was really late, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I stopped at a gas station to fill up. My GPS ended up putting me on a small highway instead of the expressway right after leaving there. But I didn't want to complicate things more, so I just followed it. My girlfriend was sleeping, so I had the radio off and drove in silence on this really dark, creepy highway. There were deer crossing signs, so I was driving extra cautious because a family friend had recently hit a deer in their truck, which did quite a number on it and also caused her to break her arm from the impact. I saw there was a pretty sharp curve coming up, so I slowed down to make it carefully. and as I'm turning, I see a figure exiting the darkness of the woods. It's a large mountain lion, with blood stained all over the front of its face. It scared the fuck out of me. I pulled up just after the turn and tried to wake my girlfriend up. I could see its large shadow make its way across the road in my rearview mirror, but by the time my girlfriend woke up, it was gone. She had lived in Wisconsin most of her life and immediately dismissed my claims that it was a mountain lion, because they're not really from that area. I told her I know what I saw, but she insisted that I was seeing things. I acted like she was probably right and continued to trip back, but I know what I saw. I've been a trucker for a few years now, and while I've seen my fair share of strange stuff on the road, there's one incident that stands out as one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to me. This happened a few years ago while I was on the long haul from Tucson, Arizona, heading up to Salt Lake City, Utah. The main highway I usually take was closed due to a flash flood, so I had to take a detour through some pretty remote, winding mountain roads in southern Utah. This was already pushing me out of my comfort zone, but I've been driving for long enough that I don't let the isolation get to me. Still, this route, it was a whole different experience. Now, if you've ever driven through rural areas at night, you'll know what I mean when I say that complete darkness out there feels different, almost suffocating. You're surrounded by miles and miles of nothing. No street lights, no towns for miles. Not a single sign of civilization. The kind of silence that's so heavy, you can almost feel it pressing in. And it was getting late, so I decided to pull off the road and get some rest before continuing on. The nearest town was over 40 miles away, and the area felt like the kind of place where, if you broke down, no one would come looking for you for hours. I parked my truck, turned off the engine, and decided to take a nap in my bunk. The stillness was almost unbearable, but after a long day of driving, I was exhausted and needed a break. I turned off the lights and laid there in the pitch-black darkness. It was dead quiet, not a single sound, except for the occasional creak of the truck settling. I drifted off, but it didn't last long. I woke up around 4 a.m. to the sound of something hitting my truck. It wasn't just wind or rain. It was like something was messing with the cables and the equipment between the cab and the trailer. These cables are just a few inches from where I was lying, and the noises were so distinct that I could hear each one of them. A tug, a scrape, a rattle. I tried to brush it off, but after a few more seconds, I heard something else. The sound of something heavy climbing onto the back of my truck. The whole thing shook. I'm talking like a couple 100 pounds worth of weight shifting around back there. At first, I thought it was a bear or maybe a mountain lion, but the more I listened, the more I realized this was different. By now, I was wide awake, heart racing and starting to panic. Whatever was out there was getting closer, and I wasn't in the mood to be dealing with a wild animal, especially not one that seemed to be trying to get into my truck. So, without thinking, I slammed my hand hard into the wall of the cab, hoping that the loud noise would scare whatever it was away. What happened next threw me for a loop. I heard a man scream. It wasn't a normal scream either. It was a terrified, blood-curdling shriek, like he was in pain or in a complete panic. The sound echoed through the air, and then I heard a loud thud, like someone had just fallen off the back of my truck. It wasn't just a soft landing. It was heavy, almost like they hit the ground hard. Then I heard voices, multiple voices, all shouting and calling out to each other, but not like normal people. These voices were strained, as though the people shouting weren't in full control of their words. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded like they were moving around my truck, getting closer. I was frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest, and all I could think was, who the hell is out there? I quickly grabbed the truck's keys, threw on the lights, and threw open the door. My headlights illuminated the area around my truck, and I was ready to bolt if I had to. What I saw wasn't what I expected at all. Standing in front of my truck, just barely visible in the harsh light, were a group of people, maybe 6 or 7 of them. The way they were moving sent a chill down my spine. They were all wearing dark clothing, but not uniforms, and their movements were stiff, like they were trying to be stealthy, but not doing a very good job of it. They didn't seem to notice me immediately, and when they did, they didn't speak, just exchanged a few glances. I could see that they were wearing headlamps, but they didn't seem like they were out for a hike or any normal outdoor activity. Their clothes were dirty and disheveled, and their eyes had a wild, desperate look in them. They were shuffling around, not walking, but almost dragging their feet like they were exhausted or delirious. "What the hell do you want?" I called out, trying to sound more confident than I felt. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and every part of me wanted to drive away. But I needed to know what was going on. "We were told to check for abandoned vehicles," another one of them said, his voice trembling. "Secure them. Make sure no one's left behind." I blinked. "I'm not abandoned. I'm just resting." The group exchanged uncomfortable glances, and one of the women in the group stepped forward. She looked worn out, eyes wide with panic, like she hadn't slept in days. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out, just a long, drawn-out breath. It was clear they weren't making much sense, and something was off about the whole situation. They were acting as though they were in some kind of trance, like they were all on edge, just barely holding it together. "You need to leave," the man who spoke earlier said again, his tone much more insistent. "Now." I had enough of this. I wasn't sticking around to figure out what was going on. I jumped back into the truck, slammed the door, and didn't waste another second. I put the truck in gear, hit the gas, and took off down the road. I drove for a few miles, heart still racing, before I stopped at the nearest truck stop to gather myself. When I told the guys at the counter about what happened, they looked at me like I was crazy. They didn't know anything about a group of people out there, and when I mentioned that they seemed like they were part of some strange drill, they just shrugged it off. I haven't seen them again, but every time I pass through that area, I get a chill down my spine. I don't know who they were or what they were doing, but that night, I'm telling you, there was something off about them, and I don't plan on ever stopping there again, unless I absolutely have to. I went to summer camp in a rural part of New Jersey back in the mid-1990s. The camp was situated on a long, narrow, man-made lake. One end of the lake was reserved for swimming, which we do as a group activity every other day or so. The swimming area had one long dock stretching straight out into the water, and 2 square floating docks further out. One of the 2 floating docks was a bit far away, and although I had spent a few summers at this camp at the time of this incident, I'd never seen anyone use the second dock. One day, our group of about a dozen 11-year-olds got the bright idea that we were going to swim out to the faraway dock. I would consider this to be a moderate challenge for a casual swimmer. When we reached the dock, I noticed a strange-looking spider on the ladder that you had to use to climb up. It was quite large in terms of overall footprint, probably about 2 inches from end to end, with long skinny legs. Spiders, of course, are normal critters to encounter in nature, but this one stood out to me because of its unusual appearance. After the long swim, we took a few minutes to lie on the dock and rest in the sun. It was relaxing, and we were all having a good time. We started messing around and decided to play one of our regular games, where we would all shuffle toward the corner of the dock, causing it to sink. As the corner of the dock started to sink and fill with water, suddenly hundreds of giant spiders came frantically pouring out from between the boards, swarming over and around the feet of those of us who were still standing on dry ground. This dock was theirs apparently. We all immediately began to scream and jump into the water to get away, but the spiders were in the water too, and stuck to us as we swam. I remember the feeling of them clinging to my wet hair, fleshy bodies, and long squirming legs hopelessly intertwined with my own strands. Adrenaline propelled us back to the main part of the swimming area, and by the time we got there, thankfully, we were spider-free. But this is a childhood trauma that lingers with me. I had not really been afraid of spiders before, but I would say this was a major turning point. The thought of us lying on the dock in the sun, completely oblivious to the horde that was lurking just inches beneath us, creeps me out to this day. This is something that's haunted me for years. It's a memory I can't shake, and I've never quite been able to explain it. What happened on that stretch of highway in Montana still gives me chills every time I think about it. It all started when I was driving home from a work trip, taking that long, lonely stretch between Great Falls and Helena, Montana. If you've ever driven that route, you know it's a place that feels like it's on the edge of nowhere. It's the kind of road where the silence presses in on you, especially at night. There are no streetlights, just the open road and dark fields that seem to stretch on forever. It was around 3 a.m., and I was cruising along in my truck, trying to keep myself awake. It's the kind of drive where you end up talking to yourself just to stay focused, and you find yourself squinting into the darkness, trying to keep your eyes from closing. I had the high beams on, no other cars in sight, just me and the road. Then, I saw something up ahead in the distance. At first I thought it was a deer crossing the median, so I started to slow down, instinctively easing off of the gas. But as I got closer, I realized something didn't quite add up. The shape wasn't moving like an animal. It was standing upright, and that's when things started to feel wrong. I slowed down even more, now creeping along at 30 miles per hour, trying to get a better look. I squinted into the night, and that's when the headlights revealed it. This wasn't a deer or any animal I'd ever seen before. It was a man. At least, that's what I thought at first. But as I got closer, I saw the figure more clearly, and I realized what was wrong. He was wearing blue coveralls, but it wasn't just his clothes that caught my attention. It was what he had on his head. I can't even describe it properly, but I'll try. He was wearing a goat mask. No, not a cheap Halloween mask. This thing looked real, like it was a part of him. It was a grotesque mask, shaped like a goat's face with long, curling horns. The eyes were the worst part. Wild, unblinking eyes that gleamed in the light, almost like they were alive. The mouth was twisted into a grin that was too wide, with sharp teeth visible through the dark gaps. I can't even explain why, but everything about it felt wrong. My gut told me to get the hell out of there, but I couldn't take my eyes off of him. The man, if you can even call him that, was standing still, his head tilted slightly, just watching my truck as I got closer. I've been on some pretty isolated roads before, but this was different. I could feel my heart starting to race, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Everything about this man in the goat mask was unsettling. Why was he out there? What was he doing standing in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m.? There was no explanation for it. I swerved into the left lane, just trying to get some distance between the man and myself. But as I passed him, something happened that made my blood run cold. The man lunged at my truck. It was like something out of a nightmare. In an instant, he shot forward, hands reaching out toward the truck. He moved so quickly that I didn't have time to react. All I could do was slam my foot down on the gas pedal and get the hell out of there. My heart was pounding in my chest as I pushed the truck faster, not daring to look back. The whole time, I could feel my eyes locked on the road ahead, but my mind kept replaying what just happened. I didn't stop driving until I got to Helena, over 30 miles away. The adrenaline was still rushing through my veins, and I didn't feel safe stopping until I was in the city. When I finally did pull into a gas station, I took a moment to catch my breath. I was trying to make sense of what had just happened, but there was no logical explanation. A man in a goat mask, standing in the middle of nowhere, lunging at my truck. It didn't make sense. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just some prank, maybe a guy in a weird costume or someone trying to mess with me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just come face to face with something, someone that I wasn't supposed to encounter, something unnatural. In the weeks after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to convince myself that I'd imagined it, that it was some trick of the mind brought on by the isolation of the road. But every time I drove that stretch of highway again, especially at night, the memory would come rushing back. It was like I could feel the eyes of that mask on me, even though I wasn't looking at it. I started avoiding that stretch of road whenever I could. I wasn't scared of the dark or the isolation. I was scared of what was out there. I didn't want to run into that mask again. And I'll admit, whenever I had to drive through that part of Montana at night, I would press the gas pedal a bit harder, just to get through it faster. I've asked myself about it over and over again. What was that guy doing out there? Why was he standing in the middle of the road wearing a goat mask? What did he want from me? Was it a prank? Or was there something more sinister going on? I don't know. And to be honest, I'm not sure I want to know. I've shared this story with a few people, but most of them just dismiss it as a weird encounter or something that my mind made up. But I'll tell you this, there was something about that night, something in the air, something in the way that man moved that makes me think it wasn't just a trick of the mind. Something happened out there, and I can't explain it. I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but every time I pass that stretch of road, I can't help but think about the man with the goat mask. I don't know what he was or what he wanted, but I do know one thing. I'll never forget the look in his eyes, and I'll never feel safe driving that road again at night. I've been involved in off-road racing for years, working as a crew guy for a team in Baja California, Mexico. It's a job that gets you into all kinds of crazy situations, and let's be honest, it's not the safest job in the world. The races are intense, the conditions are harsh, and the places you end up are sometimes downright terrifying. But out of all the wild moments I've had, there's one night that still haunts me to this day, and it's something I've never been able to explain. This happened a couple of years ago, during one of those late-night drives down the dirt roads of Baja. A buddy of mine and I were heading south along the Sea of Cortez doing a long stretch of road to Gonzaga, which, let me tell you, is in the middle of absolute nowhere. If you've ever been there, you'll know exactly what I mean. There's no civilization for miles, just endless desert, the ocean, and the occasional cactus. It was a 4-hour drive down a mostly deserted dirt road, and the only thing you have to worry about were the random locals who used the road to test their rigs late at night. Anyway, we were cruising down the road at a decent pace, trying to keep our truck steady over the uneven terrain. It was dark, pitch black really, except for the faint glow of the stars above and the occasional flash of light from our headlights. We were enjoying the peace and quiet, joking around and keeping ourselves awake when, out of nowhere, we noticed headlights in our rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. It's not unusual to see another vehicle on this road, especially at night. But then, the lights kept getting closer, and the car was tailing us faster than I was comfortable with. We'd already been on the road for a couple of hours, and it was getting late, so I figured this guy was probably just another local or tourist, racing to test his rig or blowing off steam. But then I noticed something strange. The lights coming up behind us weren't just regular headlights. They had this extra intensity to them, like the guy had some heavy-duty bar-mounted lights on top of his vehicle, which can be incredibly bright, especially on a dark road like this one, and those lights were blinding us. I could barely see the road ahead, and we were on a dangerous stretch, with sharp turns and cliffs near the sea. So, I did what any reasonable person would do. I tried to get this guy's attention. I waved my hand out of the window, signaling him to turn his lights down or move over. But he didn't budge. He just kept tailing us, the lights staying on full blast. At this point, I was getting frustrated. We were on this winding, treacherous road, and this guy was doing nothing but making it worse by blinding us. The thought of a head-on collision or crashing into the sea crossed my mind a few times. After a few minutes of this, I knew I had to get off the road. There was a sharp curve coming up near the shoreline, and if this guy didn't back off soon, I was going to have no choice but to pull off the road to avoid a crash. I searched for a spot, trying to find somewhere safe to pull over without losing control of the truck. Finally, I spotted a narrow patch of dirt that led down the edge of the road and quickly steered us off the path. The second we cleared the road, we both watched as the headlights of the truck raced by us, going way too fast for that sharp curve ahead. We thought for sure the guy was going to fly off the road and tumble down into the sea. But then something bizarre happened. Instead of crashing like we expected, the lights continued to move straight, directly toward the edge of the curve. And then, something that still doesn't make sense. The lights didn't fall off the road. They didn't dip down toward the sea either. Instead, they shot straight into the night sky, like they were being pulled up by some unseen force. The lights became brighter, then disappeared altogether, like they'd vanished into thin air. For a good minute, neither of us said a word. We just stared, both trying to make sense of what we had just seen. I don't know if it was shock, or if we were just too tired, but all I could think was, did we just see what I think we saw? My buddy was the first to speak up. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice almost trembling. I turned to him, not really sure how to respond. The fucking flying truck," I said, half joking but half serious, because I honestly couldn't think of any other way to explain what had just happened. We didn't talk about it much after that. It was like the kind of thing that, even though we both knew what we saw, you just didn't bring it up. It didn't make sense. It couldn't have been real. I mean, how do you explain a truck going way too fast, just flying up into the sky and disappearing? and there was no way we could tell anyone else about it, not without sounding like we'd lost our minds. We didn't say anything about it to anyone else when we arrived in Gonzaga. We didn't even mention it to the other guys in the team. I don't know if we were afraid of sounding crazy, or if we just did not want to relive it. Either way, we both just brushed it off and kept the experience to ourselves. But even now, years later, I can't get that image out of my head. I don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or maybe the guy was just hauling gas and did something crazy with his lights. But I can't help but think that there's no logical explanation for what we saw. We were wide awake, we were sober, and we both saw the same thing. That truck didn't just disappear, it flew. I don't know if it was some kind of freak accident or something more supernatural, but it's something I can't shake. So, to anyone driving down that stretch of road in Baja late at night, watch the skies. You never know what you might see. I'm not saying it's a flying truck or anything like that, but after that night, I can't help but wonder what else is out there. I love road trips. There's nothing more delightful to me than to get up an hour before sunrise and hit the road to a destination some hundreds of miles distant. However, there are occurrences in the wee hours when time gets thin and reality blurs around the edges. I'd like to share 3 of these stories that all share a phenomenon I've come to call the screaming between. The first was during my move from North Carolina to California. I made it in a 4-day blitz across the continental U.S., which I was pretty proud of. Day 1 passed with no trouble, moving from Goldsboro, North Carolina to Prattville, Alabama in about 12 hours. Day 2, I got all the way from Prattville to Baton Rouge, and I knocked off early to enjoy some beignets and gumbo. Day 3 was the day I heard it. It was about 4 in the afternoon, with a relatively clear day all around me. October isn't the hottest time in Texas, but my AC had quit working, so I had the windows down. V&V's Nation's Nemesis was blaring out of my shitty Honda Civic speakers when I heard a god-awful shrieking. It was like the sound of a big sheet of steel being torn lengthwise. In a panic, I turn off into a small pullout on the side of the I-10, and before I can even figure out what's going on, rain is hitting the car. A couple drops, then a torrent, and just ahead of me, where the road dips a bit, I see a runnel of water start. I look to my left, down to the south, and this massive thunderhead is pulling from behind a butte, and this wall of water is starting to pour across the road. I've never seen anything like it before, and I was stranded there a good 40 minutes as this flash flood poured not 20 feet ahead of my car across the road. The next time was a road trip to Idaho. From my new home in the Mojave, I took the route up through Nevada via Amboy and Vegas, figuring I could do the trip in about a day since the GPS predicted a 12 to 13 hour drive. The snow was starting to come down, as this was a Christmas trip, my favorite time of year to take journeys, visiting family and friends. I'd gotten roughly halfway there, around the town of Wells. It's honestly a bunch of truck stops and hotels, more of a stopover than a real town, and I was starting to get drowsy. I'd taken longer than expected due to a major traffic holdup a few hours before, and it was already pitch black around 11:30 p.m. I just rolled down the window to let a blast of cool air reinvigorate me when I heard it, that same horrifying shriek of sound. I jerked the wheel reflexively and skidded off the road. At exactly that moment, an oncoming semi drifted right into the lane I'd been in. The last story is another Christmas road trip. This time I was going from the Mojave all the way to Illinois, and just my luck, a winter storm comes tearing along the I-70, just as I'm getting on it during day 2 of my trip. It was insane. It had gone from a slightly snowy but mostly clear day in Utah to near whiteout conditions in under an hour. Now, I'm perfectly comfortable driving in the snow, and my SUV had its snow chains and 4-wheel drive in good condition. I'd replaced the Honda Civic a while back, so I figure I can keep going a few more hours at least. Then, of course, I hear it. That infernal hell shriek of sound. This time, I could swear I heard it saying 13 as it screamed through the winter snow. By this time, I'm entirely out of fucks to give when it comes to that screaming, so I hit the next exit and ducked into a hotel, even though it was only 7 p.m. and I'd been on the road less than 9 hours. The next day, as I'm driving, I counted 12 vehicles on the sides of the road, overturned and wrecked, each one with massive gashes in the sides of the vehicles, like they'd been peeled back by some horrible force. I still love road trips, but part of me is always listening for that screaming when I'm between towns. During my summer, after 21, I could buy a beer, and there was a time period where I couldn't go back to college yet for my last year, so I would hike down to a sandbar by a local river. I'd hang out, read, drink a beer or two, and get a little sun so I didn't look straight up like Gollum. Sometimes my friends would join me, but I went there solo more often than not. Well, my sandbar was kind of close to this bridge. I say kinda, 'cause I'm far down the river, but it's tall as fuck so you can see it from far away. So, I'm sitting there drinking a beer and reading, when all of a sudden, several kids show up. They look about 18 or so, guys and girls. Well, they start jumping off the bridge. Fucking dumb, because this thing is huge. Anyway, I'm watching them jump off for a second, but this one long-haired guy doesn't come back up. I hear hollering and screaming. They drag him to the bank, and I finally notice he's got blood all down his face. He jumped and smoked one of the concrete support pylons of the bridge. The water was just the perfect depth so that you couldn't see it. Before I could even think, this paramedic truck was flying down the near hillside. I don't know if he made it. I'm inclined to think not. The next week, I decided I needed to go back there. I hoped the guy was okay, but at the same time, I didn't want my last time there to be that. Well, I didn't get a choice. When I went back, it was blocked by several highway dividers and had a no trespassing sign, which, to me, kind of confirmed what happened to him. This happened to me about 5 years ago when I was living in a small rural town that might as well have been in the middle of nowhere. This town was the kind where everyone knew each other, but also where everyone knew your business if you weren't careful. It's not the kind of place you'd expect anything exciting to happen, but of course, that's never the case. So, there I was, 11 p.m. on a random weekday night, walking to my friend Jacob's house. The town was quiet, and the night was pitch black. No stars, just an occasional streetlight flickering here and there. The road I was walking on was lined with old, dilapidated houses that looked like they'd been abandoned for years. The whole area felt like it was stuck in time, isolated and strange. I was about halfway to Jacob's place when I walked by this old warehouse. It was on the outskirts of town, near the edge of a road that didn't see much traffic at all. The building looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Its windows were cracked, the paint was peeling, and the whole place was overgrown with weeds. A rusted sign barely hung above the entrance, but I could just make out the words, "Metalwork Supplies." Now, I don't know why, but something about this warehouse has always unnerved me. The vibe around it was just wrong. I had no idea who owned it, or if it even had an owner. But I'd never seen anyone going in or out. It was one of those places that people avoided, even though it wasn't really in anyone's way. So, as I'm walking past that warehouse that night, I hear this noise coming from inside. At first, I thought it was just the wind or maybe a stray animal. But then, the sound became louder, more mechanical, almost like a clang, a bang. It didn't sound like any animal I knew, and it didn't sound like the wind either. I should have just kept walking, but I was curious, too curious for my own good. I slowed down, straining to see if I could make out what was going on inside the dark building. The air was thick with the smell of rust and old metal, and there was an eerie silence between those strange sounds. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a car engine starting up. It came from the side of the warehouse, just out of sight. My heart skipped a beat. What kind of car would be out there at this hour? I could see the faint glow of headlights moving slowly around the side of the building. Whoever it was, they were deliberately keeping quiet. Then, two men, massive, broad-shouldered guys, emerged from the shadows. They were dressed in all black, moving carefully, as though they were trying not to draw attention to themselves. They were carrying something between them, wrapped in what looked like an old tarp. It was heavy, too heavy to just be tools or scrap metal. It was clearly a large object, bulky, like they were smuggling something. At first, I didn't move. I just stood there in the dark, frozen. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Why was someone carrying a giant, mysterious package out of a rundown warehouse in the middle of nowhere? I mean, who even was that? What were they up to? Then it happened. One of them glanced over and saw me. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, everything in my body screamed at me to turn around and run. But I was paralyzed. Why was I still standing here? "Hey," the guy shouted. That was enough. I snapped out of my stupor and booked it. I ran faster than I thought I ever could, my legs pumping and my heart racing. I could hear the engine roar to life behind me, the tires screeching on the gravel as the car sped off, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I don't even know how long I ran for. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3. My breath was ragged. My legs were burning, but I didn't dare stop. I had no idea if they were following me, but I wasn't about to take any chances. Finally, I glanced back. Nothing. The car was gone. I slowed down, my chest heaving as I struggled to catch my breath. The adrenaline was still rushing through me, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed. I had no idea what was happening or why, but all I knew was that I needed to get the hell out of there. I kept walking, my heart still pounding in my ears, my thoughts racing, but as I passed a row of overgrown shrubs, I saw it, the same car from before. It was driving incredibly slowly now, like they were searching for something or someone. The car crept past me, its windows rolled down, the low rumble of the engine echoing in the silence. I didn't move a muscle. My heart stopped for a second as I instinctively crouched down behind the bushes, praying they wouldn't spot me. I could hear the car slowing to a crawl. The sound of tires on gravel, the faint murmur of the engine as they scanned the area. My stomach turned, and I held my breath, afraid that if I made a single noise, they'd come right after me. The car drove past. I stayed still, not daring to move until I was sure they were gone. When I finally dared to peek out from behind the bushes, the car was nowhere to be seen. I waited a full 10 minutes before I got up and started walking again. My legs still shaky from the sprint. I made it to Jacob's house without any further incident. I didn't tell him what happened at first. I wasn't sure if it was a real threat or if I was just being paranoid. He noticed that I was out of breath and a bit off, but I just brushed it off as a weird walk. He let me stay the night, and I was grateful for the safe refuge. But the next morning, I had to walk back home. The whole time, I kept thinking about what I'd witnessed. It didn't make sense. The car, the men, the way they were moving so carefully. It was all wrong. As I walked past the warehouse again, my heart dropped into my stomach. The place was different. There were police cars parked outside, their lights flashing in the early morning mist. Yellow crime scene tape was strung up all over the entrance. I could see 2 officers standing outside, talking to a woman who was crying uncontrollably. My stomach twisted. I hadn't realized it at the time, but those guys I had seen last night, I'd been standing right there, watching them. I didn't stick around. I turned around quickly and left before anyone could ask me questions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I just narrowly escaped something far worse than I could ever understand. What did those guys have in that tarp? What was really going on in that warehouse? I didn't stick around long enough to get any real answers. Like I said, I just turned around and went home. But that morning left me feeling like something wasn't right. Like I had narrowly avoided some kind of disaster. I tried to shake it off. But it's hard to forget something when it keeps nagging at the back of your mind. So here's what I found out. And I'll be honest with you, this story gets darker than I ever thought it would. It wasn't just some petty crime. I kept hearing rumors around town. People who were close to the area started talking, and eventually, I got the piece of the puzzle that had been missing for so long. A few weeks after the incident, the police had finally released a statement about what happened, though they were keeping a lot of details under wraps. But you know how rumors work in small towns. They spread like wildfire. Turns out, the 2 guys I saw carrying the tarp weren't just petty criminals. They were involved with a local criminal syndicate. The victim, it was someone who'd been trying to break into the syndicate's operations. It was a man named Victor, and he wasn't just some random guy. He was a low-level member of the syndicate who'd started to get cold feet. People said he'd been talking to the cops, trying to get out of the whole mess. Once you start talking, you're as good as dead. What I didn't realize at the time was that the tarp the 2 men were carrying wasn't a bundle of stolen goods or equipment. It was Victor's body. They had killed him, most likely the night before, and were transporting him in the middle of the night to get rid of the evidence. It was so damn brutal. I could barely believe it when I heard the full story. I didn't hear much about Victor at the time, because the investigation was kept under wraps for a while. The police were trying to piece everything together without causing a panic in a small town. I didn't know any of the details about his past or why he was involved, but everything started to make sense once I learned who he was. Apparently, Victor had been a trusted member of the criminal organization for a while. He worked in the shadows, doing the dirty work, smuggling, money laundering, all that. But over time, he started to change. He had a family, a wife and 2 young kids, and he became disillusioned with the life he was leading. The deeper he got involved with the syndicate, the more he realized how dangerous it was. Eventually, he started slipping information to the cops, hoping they'd protect him if he cooperated. Unfortunately for him, his betrayal didn't go unnoticed. His so-called family in the syndicate found out and decided to make an example of him. I couldn't stop thinking about that night. Something about it haunted me. I kept replaying the scene over and over in my head. The two men carrying the tarp, the car driving slowly, and the way the air felt like it was about to snap. Then, months later, I heard the rest of the story, and it shook me. One night, after the whole thing had started to die down, the police finally made an arrest. It wasn't the two guys I'd seen at the warehouse that night, though. Those two were part of a much bigger network, and they managed to escape the law for a while. But eventually, they were caught in a sting operation. The man who got arrested was Carlos, a mid-level operator in the syndicate who'd been working with Victor for years. Carlos was the one who arranged for Victor's death. He had orchestrated everything. From the moment Victor started talking to the police, to the moment they decided to silence him for good. Carlos wasn't the one in the car with the tarp that night, but he was the one who ordered it. And when they arrested him, the police uncovered something horrifying. There were other bodies. This wasn't just about one man. It was about a long string of disappearances. It turns out that the warehouse wasn't just a place for the syndicates to stash things. It was used for all kinds of illegal activity. They had been operating in the town for years, pulling in people from all over. The criminal organization wasn't just local. It had connections to some of the bigger, scarier syndicates operating across the country. The whole thing went much deeper than I realized. Victor wasn't the only one to suffer because of the organization. The police found multiple missing persons linked to the same group, all tied to the syndicate's operations in the region. There were whispers about how they'd been silencing people for years, using intimidation, violence, and fear to keep their secrets. Victor's death was a warning to anyone who might consider crossing them. His betrayal cost him his life, and it cost his family everything. His wife and kids were left behind to pick up the pieces, and as tragic as that is, his death did have kind of a twisted justice. After Victor's murder, the investigation into the syndicate intensified, and things began to unravel. Here's the thing. I never found out what really happened to those two men I saw carrying the tarp. I've asked around, and it's been suggested that they may have had something to do with the cleanup operations for the syndicate, but no one's been able to confirm whether they were the ones directly responsible for Victor's death. After all, in criminal organizations like that, people tend to get lost in the shuffle. Their roles never truly revealed. The most chilling part, some of the officers working on the case later admitted that they had suspicions about certain people within the force being involved with the syndicate. The web of corruption and crime ran deeper than anyone realized, and no one was ever truly safe. In the end, I learned something that still sticks with me to this day. Sometimes, the most innocent things, like taking a walk at night, can lead you into situations you've never imagined. I didn't realize what I was seeing at the time, but if I hadn't been in the wrong place at the wrong time, I wouldn't have witnessed Victor's last moments or even realized the depth of the darkness that had been quietly simmering in our town for years. And to this day, I can't shake the image of that tarp. That was Victor. And this all went down in my small town. I've debated whether or not to share this story for years now, but after hearing other strange and unsettling experiences on here, I've decided it's time. This happened when I was working as an instructor for a wilderness survival course in the late 2000s that took groups of people into the woods to teach them how to survive with nothing but the basics. It wasn't just a camping trip. It was a real survival experience where people learned essential skills: shelter building, fire starting, water purification, and foraging. We took them deep into the woods of upstate New York, far from civilization. The areas we went to were remote, usually surrounded by thick forest, miles away from the nearest town. One of the exercises we'd do was to take students to a secluded spot in the woods. It was about half a mile from the main camp, but we always took a winding, circuitous route, so it felt much further and more isolated. Once we got to the site, the students had built their own shelters out of materials they could find in the forest. They'd spend the night there, isolated, with only their shelters and a small campfire to keep them company. It was a tough night for the students, especially after a long day of survival training. And as one of the instructors, it was my job to keep an eye on them and make sure they were all safe. That night, we were out with a small group of students. It had gotten dark and the temperature had dropped. We had finished eating, and the students had already made their shelters. They were getting ready to turn in for the night, and the instructors were cleaning up the fire pit. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. The first odd thing was the sound. It started as a faint, almost imperceptible thump in the distance, like a deep rumble coming from beneath the ground. At first, I figured it was just the wind rustling through the trees, or maybe an animal moving through the woods. But then the sound grew louder and more distinct. It wasn't the wind. It was too steady and rhythmic, like a low hum that filled the air. The noise wasn't coming from above or around us. It felt like it was coming from deep within the earth itself. At first, I didn't say anything to the other instructors, but I could tell they were starting to notice it too. I could see them exchanging glances, a mix of curiosity and concern. The students hadn't noticed it yet, thank God. We didn't want to scare them, so we kept it quiet. Then the hum shifted. It became more erratic, almost like the sound of a distant drum beat. It echoed through the woods, getting louder, faster, and more intense. It felt like it was getting closer, but then it would fade away, only to return a few moments later, louder than before. The sound pulsed like it had a rhythm of its own. The temperature seemed to drop even further as the sound continued, and the night felt suddenly very still and unnatural. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a large animal or some kind of weather phenomenon. But the more I listened, the more it seemed wrong. The rhythmic thrum had an almost unnatural quality to it, as if it was being made deliberately. Something about it made my skin crawl. The students were now all in their shelters, probably asleep by this point, but the sound didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder. The closer it got, the more the trees around us seemed to shake. I turned to my fellow instructors, but none of us knew what to make of it. We stood there, listening, wondering if anyone else was hearing this. The hum was now more of a deep, vibrating resonance, filling the air around us like the sound of a large drum or a massive engine revving, only deeper and somehow more otherworldly. By now, I couldn't focus on anything else but the sound. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard in the wilderness. We waited, thinking it would stop, but it didn't. The sound swelled in intensity, then began to fade again. But this time, it wasn't quite as loud. The eerie, drumbeat-like hum seemed to go in cycles. When it faded, it almost seemed like it was getting further away. but we still felt like it was circling us, as if something was moving around the perimeter of our camp, just out of view. I didn't want to alert the students, so I told the instructors to keep quiet, but we couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. We all stood by the fire, trying to remain calm, but the longer the hum went on, the more unsettling it became. And then, almost suddenly, the sound stopped. The silence that followed felt deafening. My ears were ringing, and I could feel the tension in the air. None of us spoke for a moment. We were all processing what had just happened, still unsure of what we had just experienced. I remember trying to convince myself it was just some kind of weird, natural phenomenon. Maybe a nearby animal or an odd atmospheric condition. But deep down, I knew something was off. The rest of the night was uneventful. We kept the fire going, stayed alert, and didn't sleep much. I kept thinking back to the sound and its strange rhythm. There was something about it that felt wrong, but nothing happened after that. The students slept through it, and the next morning, we packed up and returned to the main camp. It wasn't until a few days later that we learned the truth. One of the other instructors, who had a friend in a nearby town, overheard a conversation about a strange event that had occurred just a few days before our wilderness trip. There had been reports of loud noises in the area, a deep, rhythmic drumming sound coming from the woods not far from where we were camped. Some locals had thought it was some kind of ritual, though no one could explain it. They said it was tied to a group that had gathered in the woods that night. The details were vague, but after hearing this, it all clicked. The hum, the rhythmic drumming, it had to be connected to that group. As it turned out, there had been a large gathering in the woods not far from where we were camped. A rally. The gathering was kept quiet, and the police hadn't released much information about it. But some people in the area had recognized it for what it was. It was an extremist group meeting, and the drumming and hum we heard, that was part of their ritualistic practices. The sounds we heard were the echoes of a dark gathering that we unknowingly camped right next to. It made sense now. The sound of the deep hum and the way it moved and pulsed through the woods. It was all tied to that gathering, and we had unwittingly been caught in its wake. I later learned that that particular group performed animal sacrifices, amongst other disturbing practices. It was chilling. Not much scares me out in the woods, except other human beings. I've been debating whether or not to share this story for a few years now. It's one of those things that, if I told anyone, they'd think I was insane. But here I am, hoping maybe someone out there might believe me, or at least understand the unease that still gnaws at me to this day. This happened a long time ago, around 12 years ago, and I still remember it vividly. To give you some context, I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of a small town in the Midwest, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business, and kids play outside until it gets dark. My best friend, Sam, and I were typical teenagers, not interested in the drama of high school, but more in the mystery of the world around us. We often spent our time exploring the town, looking for strange places, and trying to uncover stories that no one else seemed to know. Our neighborhood was small, only about 20 homes in total, but it bordered a massive stretch of forest that seemed to go on forever. Most people avoided the woods, preferring to stay on the well-lit streets or their manicured lawns, but Sam and I weren't like that. We had a different mindset. The woods called to us. There was something about that dense, dark forest, with its winding paths and thick foliage, that stirred our curiosity. We'd wander into the woods at night, sometimes with flashlights, other times without, just to see what we could find. And on occasion, we'd push our boundaries, walking deeper into the trees than anyone else would dare go. Now, here's where it gets weird. I'm not saying I'm some kind of paranormal expert, but what happened that night was beyond anything I could have imagined. I still can't explain it. I don't know if I ever will. So, on the night in question, Sam and I had decided to go for one of our late-night walks through the woods. It was around midnight, and there was a full moon, casting an eerie glow over the trees. The light cut through the thick branches, creating long, shadowy figures that seemed to twist and move in the corner of my vision. The air was thick with moisture, and the smell of wet earth hung heavy. It was one of those nights where everything felt just a little off, but you couldn't put your finger on why. We were walking along a well-known path when we noticed something strange. There was a light up ahead. It wasn't the usual streetlight glow or the dim light of a distant house. This was a warm, yellowish glow, almost like candlelight, coming from deep within the woods. The light flickered, like it was being carried by someone, but there was no sound, no footsteps, no rustling of leaves. Just the light. We paused and stared at it for a moment, unsure of what we were seeing. Sam squinted into the distance, his expression uncertain. "What do you think it is?" he asked. "I don't know," I replied, "but we should check it out. Maybe someone's out here." We both shrugged and continued walking toward it, our curiosity getting the better of us. As we got closer, the glow seemed to grow brighter, and that's when we saw him. At first, it was just a figure standing there near a clearing. But as we drew nearer, I realized it was a man. He was tall, wearing old-fashioned clothes, a kind of patched-up coat with a tattered brimmed hat, and boots that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in decades. His clothes were faded and worn, like they had been in the woods for a long time, but his posture was straight and rigid. He wasn't moving, just standing there, as if waiting for something. His face was partially hidden in the shadows, but I could make out the outline of his features. His skin was pale, almost ghostly white, and there was something unsettling about the way his hands hung by his sides. Thin, bony fingers that seemed to twitch every so often. He was staring intently at something on the ground, almost as if in deep thought. The closer we got, the more I noticed how still everything seemed. The wind had stopped, and the usual rustling of the trees had fallen silent. Even the distant sounds of crickets had ceased. It was like the entire world was holding its breath. I remember feeling an odd sense of unease, like something wasn't right. My stomach tightened, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I nudged Sam and whispered, "Do you see him?" Sam nodded, but didn't say anything, his expression tightening. At that moment, the man slowly turned towards us. His movement was unnaturally slow, as if he were trying to take his time, savoring the moment. And when he fully faced us, I almost wish he hadn't. His eyes, their blackness hit me like a punch to the gut. His eyes were completely black, no whites, just two endless voids. The kind of black that swallowed everything around it, leaving only darkness. It was as if his eyes had no depth, no soul behind them, just emptiness. The way he looked at us was cold, calculating, and piercing. It felt like he was staring right into my very soul. In the split second that our gazes met, everything about the world around us felt wrong. It wasn't just the eyes. The air felt thick, as if it were pressing down on me, suffocating me. And for some reason, I knew we shouldn't be there. It wasn't like the usual unease you feel when you're in a dark, quiet place. This was something deeper. It was primal. Then, In the most unsettling way, he spoke. His voice was low and gravelly, like someone who hadn't spoken in years, as if his words had been trapped in his throat, desperate to be released. "You really shouldn't be here," he said, his voice taunting. My heart was pounding in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen in place, as if the man's eyes had put me under some kind of trance. Sam, on the other hand, wasn't frozen. He wasn't standing there like I was. His feet shifted nervously, and then, as if the weight of the moment had finally hit him, he let out a sharp breath and whispered, "We need to go." That was all it took. His words broke the spell that seemed to hold me in place. I grabbed his arm, and without a word, we turned around and ran. I've never run so fast in my life. We didn't look back. We didn't stop to breathe or check if the man was following us. We just ran. The sound of our feet crashing against the forest floor seemed to echo in the stillness. But everything else was eerily quiet, as if the woods were holding their breath too. The further we got from the clearing, the more my chest tightened, the more my fear grew. It felt like something was chasing us. Not a sound, not a movement, but something was out there, watching, waiting for us to falter. I don't know how long we ran, but when we finally broke free from the edge of the forest and reached the street, it was like the weight of the world lifted from my shoulders. We didn't stop until we were safely inside my house, locked behind the door. I stood there, trying to catch my breath, while Sam paced back and forth, his hands running through his hair. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide. He couldn't stop looking out the window, as if he expected the man to be standing in the yard, watching us. Finally, Sam turned to me, his voice shaky. "Did you see his eyes?" I nodded. I saw them. They were black, completely black. There was nothing behind them, just emptiness. For a long time, neither of us said anything. We didn't have to. We both knew that what we'd encountered wasn't something we could explain. We didn't want to talk about it the next day, or the day after. But I could tell that something inside of us had changed. The woods no longer felt like a place of adventure. It felt like something else, something far older and far darker than we could ever understand. We never went back to those woods again, not even when the curiosity gnawed at us, urging us to find answers. There was something about that man, something wrong, something we couldn't explain. We tried to tell ourselves it was just a weird encounter, a trick of the light, maybe even a hallucination. But deep down, we knew the truth. That man, whatever he was, had been waiting for us. There's a saying in our town that goes, "The woods have their own secrets. Maybe they are best left alone." Okay, so I've been on the road for a while now. I've seen some pretty messed up things in my time, from accidents to addicts, panhandlers, and everything in between. The kind of stuff you don't even want to think about while you're trying to make it to the next town. But there's one story from a few years back that still gives me the chills whenever I think about it. It all happened on one of those long stretches through Kansas, the kind of road that seems to go on forever, with nothing but flat land, little towns, and just the emptiness in between. It was a night like any other. I had been driving all day, and I was well into the night shift. The headlights of my truck cut through the darkness, but outside of the faint glow from my cabin, All I could see was the black nothingness of the Kansas landscape. I've driven through this area many times before, so I was used to the isolation. But this time, something felt off. There's this stretch of I-70 in Kansas that feels like it goes on forever, and I've driven it at least a dozen times. The road's mostly flat, with barely any lights or signs of life. Just a few small towns every 30 miles or so, and then nothing. I'd been on the road for several hours, and I was feeling the fatigue start to set in. I'd seen a few trucks go by earlier, but it was quiet now. So quiet, I could almost hear the hum of my engine in my ears. Around 2 a.m., I noticed a beat-up old car. It wasn't anything special, a faded, rusted sedan, the kind of car you see on the side of the road with a "free" sign on it. But it was out of place here in the middle of nowhere. No one else was on the road, and yet, this car appeared out of nowhere, headlights flickering as it came up behind me. I didn't think much of it at first, just another car, probably someone else who'd been out driving too long. But as I got closer, I saw something strange. The people in the front of the car were staring unblinkingly at me. They weren't just glancing in my direction, they were staring with this unnerving intensity. Now, I've been on the road long enough to know that sometimes you'll see the same vehicle a couple of times, especially if there aren't many cars out there. But this was different. This wasn't just a normal pass. I could see them turning their heads to follow me, even as the driver should have been paying attention to the road. He was staring at me again. It wasn't curiosity. He was studying me, and both of their stares were very unsettling, and they made a serious pit form in my stomach. A few minutes passed, and I thought I was just imagining things. Maybe I was getting too tired. But then, a few minutes later, the same car passed me again. How? There was no way it could have pulled off anywhere. There wasn't a rest area for miles, and the car had just gone by me. But here it was, coming up behind me again, the figures still staring out of the windows. I tried not to panic, but this time, I knew something was off. I was starting to feel like I was being followed, like they were watching me on purpose. Every time they passed, it was the same. No sign of them stopping anywhere, no sign of them pulling over. Just this weird, eerie, repeated loop. Now, I've seen strange things on the road before, but this was different. I tried to ignore it, tell myself I was just tired, but as I kept driving, the car kept showing up. Every time it passed, I could see the figures craning their necks to stare at me. And then, the car passed me again, but this time, it didn't just pass. It pulled off the road down a small dirt track, and then parked in the dark. The figures inside didn't move. They just sat there, staring at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were waiting for me to do something. I kept driving, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease crawling up my spine. It was one of those moments where you wonder if you're overreacting, if maybe it's all in your head. But then, as I passed a little town on the side of the road, I saw the car again. This time, it was parked by the side of the road, completely still. There was no sign of anyone in the front seat. I didn't stop to find out what was going on. I just kept going, faster now, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight. I pulled into the TA truck stop in Lemon a little while later, needing to take a break and get my bearings. When I got out of the truck and walked into the stop, I thought I was done with it. But when I was at the counter getting my coffee, I overheard a trucker talking to the cashier. "Did you see the car out there?" he said, sounding kind of agitated. "What car?" the cashier asked. The man described the same sedan and explained that it had been following him for miles. I froze. He was talking about the same car. I walked over to him. "You've seen it too?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Yeah, I've seen it. It keeps passing me over and over again. It's like they're just watching. I don't know what it is, man, but it's giving me the creeps." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just me. Other drivers had seen it too. I wasn't crazy. I didn't stick around long. I paid for my coffee and went straight back to my truck, locking the door behind me. I sat there for a while, just staring out of the truck, trying to make sense of it all, but there was no sense to be made. It was just one of those things that doesn't make any logical sense, but still happened. And I don't know what the hell it was, but it still creeps me out when I think about it. I'm telling you, sometimes there's something about the road at night, something that doesn't add up. Maybe it's fatigue, or maybe it's something more. But when you see that car, with the figure staring out of the window, you can't just ignore it. If you're ever driving across Kansas late at night, and you see a rusted-out sedan with people staring through the window at you, don't stick around to figure out why. Just keep moving. This encounter was, and still is, significantly creepier and more terrifying than anything else I've experienced so far in my life. It still haunts my thoughts anytime I go back to the place where this occurred, and leaves me feeling afraid and skeptical of any stranger I meet. So, here goes. To give you some information about the incident, it was on this past Earth Day. My best friend and I, Des, decided it would be a fun and cliché idea to go to a local skate park in our area, which we go to often, and hike, smoke some weed, go on our favorite trails. This is something we do fairly often. I've always felt safe there, and nothing has ever happened to make me concerned for my safety. Until fucking Earth Day. Des and I are driving around the park, which is fairly large, and there are countless numbers of trails to choose from, all with varying degrees of privacy. Some are busy, while some are practically secluded. Because Des and I were planning to smoke some of that sweet green, clearly we would want to pick a more secluded route that day. So we decided on one of our favorite trails, one we call Nature's Eyeball, and we drive over to it and park. Once we get there, we notice there's no other cars, which is great. Everything is wonderful today. We grab all of our stuff from the car and head off on the trail and begin our journey. The way this trail is set up is that there is a longer, wider main trail, and then at some points, the trail branches off into some smaller marked paths. Our favorite part of the trail is the part that looks like Nature's Eyeball, hence the name. The way a river winds around a curve with an island in the middle that looks like a giant eye. So we take a smaller side path to get to it. At this point, we haven't seen anyone else on the path. We reason that it's a good time to smoke, and so we sit down and prepare the weed. Where we are located on the path, we can still see the main trail, so we look out and see if anyone is coming. For a good 10 minutes, everything is dandy, until I'm hitting the pipe and Des says that she sees a man getting close to us on the main trail. We quickly put everything away and walk further down the side path to avoid an awkward encounter with whoever this person was. After waiting a few minutes, we decide that it's safe to walk back to the main trail, being as there's no sign this man walked down the side path that we were on. And we actually decide that it would be a good idea to walk further down the main trail, something we hadn't done before. But it's Earth Day. Appreciate the sights, take in the nature, right? Fucking wrong, no. Once we get back to the main trail, we start to walk further back into the woods. Des didn't say anything to me about this at the time, but apparently there was a man sitting by some rocks where the main trail split off to the side trail. I didn't notice him, but it's very likely the guy we'd spotted earlier. Either way, we're walking down the trail, and I become conscious of the sound of footsteps a far distance behind us. I looked back to see an older man walking the trail as well, and I didn't think anything of it, because it's not uncommon to meet another person far back in the system, no matter how secluded the trail is. We continue walking, and I'm now aware of the fact that he's speeding up and getting closer to us, while Des and I are walking at a constant pace. Still, I'm not too concerned, and off to the right of us, there's a clearing that's grade A picture material, and so Des asks me to take a picture of her in it, with a tree for Snapchat. I agree, and as I'm trying to get the perfect angle, the stranger walking behind us is now behind me, and he asks if I'd like for him to take a picture of the both of us instead. I'm a very shy person, so even though at this moment I'm slightly weirded out, I kindly take his offer and thank him. Keep in mind, I'm not a judgmental asshole, and don't usually base judgments of people off the way they look, but this one was a creepy bastard. I'd say he was in his early to late 40s, overweight, had on a trucker hat, fucking Jeffrey Dahmer glasses, a creepy adult star stash, also had on a plain white t-shirt tucked into denim dad shorts, and to wrap up the package, he had on New Balances with ankle socks. So the stranger man takes the picture. We walk back over to him, look at the photo, and thank him again for doing it. Instead of walking away like we expected him to, he stands there with us for a solid minute or so, while she posts the photo and checks her messages. Now we resume our trail walk, and this guy starts to walk directly behind us. And when I say directly, I mean he was right next to me, and if I step to the right, I would bump into him, and I'm one who really doesn't like their personal space interfered with. Right off the bat, the guy says, "You girls are two very pretty ladies," and instantly my "something here is not right" switch flips on. I accept the compliment and politely give a thank you back, but I don't initiate any conversation. I only reply if he asks something that requires an answer. He begins to ask us questions about our lives, how old we were, where we go to school, stuff like that. Both of us lie and say we're older than we actually are, and that we go to the college that's close by. Then he starts to ask more personal questions, and he asks if either of us have boyfriends. I have a boyfriend, but she and I both lie and say that we're actually together and have been for a long time. Hoping that this puts him off actually causes the reverse. He loves this about us. In fact, he, and I quote, loves the gay community and has a boyfriend of his own. At the moment, I'm not deathly afraid, but I am quite uncomfortable and text Des, saying to make up a lie that we're headed back to go get pizza, hopefully to lose this guy. So we start talking about this imaginary plan and begin to turn around and say our goodbyes, once again thinking this man will continue walking the trail by himself. When he turns back and starts to walk with us, and this time he's walking by my side even closer than before. From this point on, every conversation topic that he brings up is sexual in nature, or he finds a way to make a sexual comment about almost anything. Everything about this situation genuinely skeeves me out and makes me want to throw up. At one point, he comments on how there's nobody out here today, and how the park is so secluded that you wouldn't believe what you could get away with out here. Every single thing coming out of his mouth is a red flag, and I want to crawl out of my skin or for some jogger to pass by us on the trail. But we're still very far back in the woods, and there's nobody around. And I think about how I could probably scream, and nobody would be close enough to hear it, or to come help. The final straw was when we got on the conversation topic of Craigslist. How fitting. He mentioned how he always saw ads in the personals about people asking to meet other people in the park that we were in for sex or sexual favors. He even said that he's actually happened upon people doing it out in the woods, saying how sometimes it would be a man and a woman, a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. I'm terrified out of my damn mind right now. But if this man had intentions of doing something bad to one or both of us, I was trying to remain confident and put off a vibe that I wasn't as scared shitless as I was. So I try to make conversation and ask him what he does in that situation. If he walks past, says something, reports it, or something else. And get this is the part that made me question my safety the most. I knew something was going to happen, without a doubt. He says, "Oh, I just watch. Yeah, just watch. Trust me, it's better to just watch." He repeated it 3 times. Holy shit. I knew that I was going to die at the hands of this creepy bastard. Now, I know that I need to think fast and do whatever I can to make us appear not as vulnerable and to get us out of this situation. I text Des and tell her to have someone call her and to have them stay on the phone with her until we are safely back in the car. I also managed to slip my hand in my bag inconspicuously and grab my pocket knife, open it in the bag, and pull it out, and have it in my hand on the side furthest from him, where he couldn't see it. I was shaking so hard that I couldn't hold it steady. Des apparently texted both her mom and dad and tells them what's going on, tries to get in touch with her mom, to no avail. But her dad calls her, and I believe we're saved. They're talking for a very long time. She manages to work into conversation the exact name of the road we're on, and that we're walking on a trail and headed home. Everything is going smoothly, until Des's dad fucks us over completely. Keep in mind, Des's phone is broken, so she can only talk on speakerphone. The creepy stranger man can hear every word of this conversation. In the middle of talking, Des's dad says, "So is that man still following you on the trail?" Fuck me. Des hangs up immediately. Stupid move, maybe, but she did. I ask if she lost connection, trying to play it off, and she says yeah. The service is really spotty in the park. Then the guy says, "Did you tell your dad that I was following you?" We're not back to the car yet, and by no means are we safe. We make up a bullshit excuse of telling her dad about a guy we saw on the trail earlier. Half-assed, but he buys it, and we're okay for the moment. I also mention how there's all kinds of people out here, and that I always carry my knife and taser with me for protection. You never know what could happen. Overall, we put up a pretty good front of not being innocent, easy targets, and somehow we make it back to the trailhead where the cars are. Once we make it, we say our calm goodbyes and walk quickly to the car. I can't describe how good it felt to get in, lock the doors, and just scream. To be alive, I don't know, but I can't even begin to describe the terror of that situation. I never reported it or even told my parents. My friends and my boyfriend are all aware of what happened, however. So, terrifying potential murderer / sexual assaulter man, let's not meet ever again. Okay, so this is going to be a long one. I still can't believe it all happened, but it did. And I feel like it's time to share this insane experience. I'm still recovering from it all. I'm a pretty chill guy, not into drama or conflict, and I definitely try to keep things low-key. At the time this all happened, I was in my mid-20s. just out of a relationship with my ex, Sarah, and everything seemed pretty normal. That is, until things took a bizarre turn that would completely mess up my life in ways I could never have anticipated. So, Sarah and I were together for about 2 years. We were pretty serious at the start, but towards the end, things weren't clicking anymore. I could tell we were headed toward a breakup, and while it was sad, I wasn't devastated. Relationships sometimes just don't work out, right? We ended things amicably, or at least I thought we did. No major drama, just one of those "we're better off as friends" breakups. We split up in early summer, and for the next month or so, things seemed pretty chill. But then, things started to get weird. A few months later, I get a message from Sarah. I had been in contact with her here and there, just casual check-ins, nothing of substance. I wanted to remain friends. She drops the bombshell that she's pregnant. And not just pregnant. She's pregnant with twins. Yeah, 2 babies. At first I was shocked. We were always careful, and I wondered how she knew it was mine, since we had been separated for a couple of months. But I kept my cool, asked a couple of questions, and figured it could be some kind of mistake, or maybe she was confused. But then I remembered how she had mentioned how we talked about having kids at some point in the future. Maybe she just felt like it was the right time. But still, that obviously didn't sit right with me. What made it even weirder was that she immediately started talking about how she wanted to give the babies to one of my best friends. This friend, Lucy, was someone who I'd known for years. She was great, but had struggled with infertility issues and was devastated by not being able to have kids of her own. Sarah had somehow become close with Lucy, and out of the blue, Sarah was telling me she was going to give the babies to her. I mentioned this to Lucy, and she had no idea what I was talking about. I was genuinely confused and somewhat freaked out. I didn't know if Sarah was joking or just messed up in the head, but I didn't really know how to respond. So I just kind of let it slide. I know, but genuinely, I guess something in my gut told me she was making this up. A few weeks later, Sarah started posting on Facebook. It wasn't about the pregnancy specifically, but more like general, "I'm so stressed out" posts. As time went on, she started getting more pointed, mentioning how much of a deadbeat I was for bailing on her and not supporting her during her pregnancy. She wrote about how she was dealing with so much on her own, how I was causing her stress by not being involved, and how she was going through all of this alone. She even made a post about how she was really feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders, and that I needed to step up. It was bad, really bad. People in her life started commenting, and her posts started to paint a picture of me as this awful person who couldn't care less about my ex and the kids she was carrying. Sarah was making me out to be a villain when I had literally no idea what was going on. But it didn't stop there. Lucy had been following these posts and believed that Sarah was pregnant. After all, why would she lie about something like that? Like I said, she had been struggling with her own fertility issues and had always wanted kids. So, when Sarah started talking about giving her the babies, Lucy got really excited. She was emotional, telling me how much it meant to her that Sarah was willing to give up her children. She had always wanted to be a mother, and the idea of getting Sarah's kids gave her hope. I was caught off guard by how emotional Lucy got about it. I understood her pain, but I didn't know how to break it to her that something about all of this didn't seem right. I started to feel guilty though, like maybe I should step up and be more involved, even if I wasn't sure if the pregnancy was real. Then, things went from bad to worse. 4 months into the pregnancy, Sarah made a post saying that she'd miscarried. She didn't go into much detail, but she said the doctor had told her the miscarriage was caused by the stress that I had caused her. She said the doctor told her that all the drama and emotional strain from our breakup was too much for her body to handle, and that it led to her losing the babies. Lucy was absolutely devastated by this. I mean, she'd been over the moon about the idea of being a mom, and now she was crushed. She immediately started blaming me, calling me a monster, and saying that I'd caused Sarah to lose the babies by not stepping up. The floodgates opened, and I found myself being torn apart by Lucy and all of Sarah's supporters. They blamed me for everything, and the guilt was overwhelming. I tried to explain myself, tried to clarify that I never knew about Sarah's pregnancy or had any involvement with it, but it didn't matter. People had already made up their minds about me. Lucy and I got into a huge fight over it, and honestly, it was the end of our friendship. She accused me of not caring about Sarah, of being a selfish jerk, and I couldn't fix it. The damage was done. As time went on, and mutual friends gave me the cold shoulder, I started to believe that maybe Sarah had been telling the truth. I started to doubt myself and felt this overwhelming guilt. I slipped into depression and withdrew from going out with friends. I fell into a cycle of work, game, sleep, repeat, not wanting to hear comments from friends or have to deal with side-eye. A year later, I found out the truth. I ran into one of Sarah's old friends. Sarah had confessed to her that her pregnancy was fake, and it was all part of some crazy plan to get back at me and keep the attention on her. Maggie, her friend, saw Sarah for who she was and was disgusted by her actions. Maggie asked how I was and seemed genuinely apologetic about the whole thing. The first person from that group to show any concern towards me since all of this started. Sarah had never been pregnant. The entire thing had been a lie from the start. She had never been carrying twins, and she had never miscarried. She made the whole thing up to manipulate me, destroy my reputation, and create drama for her own twisted reasons. I don't know what her motives were. Maybe she just wanted attention, or maybe she was trying to ruin my life. But the fact that she went so far as to make a public spectacle of it, and then drag Lucy into it, was beyond messed up. So, what happened after all of this? Well, Sarah went on to have 4 kids with a different guy. And Lucy, she's now an alcoholic swinger, married to a 30-year-old man. Both Sarah and Lucy being 23. I can't even make this stuff up. After all that drama, Lucy's life took a sharp turn into something that's just as chaotic as the mess Sarah created. As for me, I've been working on rebuilding my life. It took a while to heal from the betrayal of my ex and losing one of my best friends. But I'm doing better now. It's hard to trust people, but I've learned a lot about toxic people and manipulation. And I'm just grateful that I'm no longer caught up in that mess. I still don't know what Sarah's goal was. Maybe she wanted to break me down, or maybe she was just bored, but at the end of the day, it didn't work. I'm stronger for it, and I've learned that some people will do anything to destroy your life if you let them. Anyway, that's my story. Thanks for listening. I'm still baffled by the whole thing, but sometimes life just throws you curveballs like that. I feel like I need to share this because I don't want anyone else to go through what I've been through. If you've ever been in a relationship with someone who seemed normal at first, but later became obsessively fixed on you, this might hit too close to home. When I was 21, I started dating a guy, Kyle. He was 26 at the time. We got along well enough, and while I was aware of the age difference, it didn't seem like a big deal. He seemed mature, charming, and funny. The relationship only lasted a few months, but I didn't think much of it after it ended. I was busy with my life, work, and school, and I figured that was just how things go at that age. Relationships come and go. A year passed, and I was in a new relationship. Life was moving along, and I'd put Kyle out of my mind. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from him. He said he missed me and hoped I was doing well. I was single at the time and thought it would be harmless to catch up. I didn't think there was any harm in meeting him for lunch. We met at a small restaurant near my office. We talked for a bit, but I immediately felt uncomfortable. Something about him seemed off, like he was trying too hard to rekindle something that didn't exist anymore. He seemed different, more intense, almost desperate. I politely told him I wasn't interested in dating again. We parted ways with no drama. I thought that was the end of it. But then, things started getting strange. It wasn't just one or two texts. It quickly escalated into something much darker. At first, they were harmless. "I miss you. We could work this out." I didn't respond, but it didn't stop. He kept texting, and when I didn't answer, his messages began to get more insistent. Then, the tone shifted. It wasn't just sad or confused anymore. It was angry. "You ruined my life. I thought you cared about me. I'll never forgive you for this." I told him, as kindly and firmly as I could, that I wasn't interested and asked him to stop, but that only made things worse. His messages started to get aggressive. He started calling me names, accusing me of ruining everything, of being selfish. The intensity of his messages grew. He began sending me screenshots of things I'd said months ago, twisting them in disturbing ways, making it clear he'd been obsessively rereading our past conversations. At this point, I knew something wasn't right. I blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A couple of weeks later, I started receiving emails. It was the same thing. Rants about how I had destroyed him, how I was cruel, and how I was the cause of all of his misery. But these emails were different. They were more menacing, more personal. Some of them were so deeply uncomfortable, I couldn't even finish reading them. One email had a picture of me from a time when I had no idea he was following me, taken while I was out shopping, completely unaware he was there. I don't even know how he got that picture, but it made my skin crawl. I started to feel watched. Then, the emails turned into threats. In one, he said, "If you don't talk to me, you'll regret it. You have no idea how far I can go." That was when I decided to get the police involved. I showed them the emails, the picture, and explained what was happening. They took it seriously, and the police contacted him. They warned him that any further harassment would lead to legal consequences. I thought that would be enough. I thought it was over. I was wrong. A few months later, I changed jobs. I was hoping that moving to a new city and starting fresh would give me some peace. But after a few months in my new role, I received another email. Kyle had somehow found my new work email. The subject was, "You can't escape me." The content made me physically sick. He detailed my new work schedule, my commute, the coffee shop I went to after work. This time, there was a clear threat. "I'll be watching you until you talk to me again. You can't hide from me. I'll find you." I couldn't believe what I was reading. He was threatening to keep tracking me until I gave in, and I couldn't see any end to it. I didn't know what to do. I reached out to the police again, but this time, I felt more alone than ever. I tried everything, and it didn't work. That's when I found out he'd gotten married during the 2 years since we last spoke. I debated whether to involve his wife, but after one particularly terrifying message, I knew I had to. I couldn't just ignore it anymore. The message said, "I will ruin you if you don't come back to me. You will regret this, and I'll make sure you never forget what we had." I reached out to his wife. I told her everything, explained what had been happening. At first, she didn't believe me, but when I offered proof, screenshots of the texts, the emails, and the disturbing messages, she finally understood the situation. She asked for everything I had. I sent her the photos, the threats, everything. Some of the things he wrote were so twisted that I had to stop reading them. He had talked about hurting me, about how he would make me his again, whether I liked it or not. His obsession with me had grown to the point where he was willing to go to extreme lengths to get me back. She confronted him, and I didn't hear from either of them for a while. I thought that maybe she'd put a stop to it, that it was finally over. It wasn't. A few months later, Kyle began following me, literally. I'd see him driving near my apartment, watching from a distance. He wasn't subtle about it either. One day, I saw him standing across the street, just staring at my window. I didn't know how to explain that to anyone, but I knew I was in danger. I went to the police again, and they agreed to help. I didn't want to involve anyone else, but at this point, I had no choice. I filed for a restraining order. The police kept him away for a while, but I couldn't stop feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting for me to slip up. Now, almost 9 years after we first dated, he started messaging me again. He still finds ways to reach out. I get texts every now and then from blocked numbers, angry messages, threats. Sometimes he'll ask how my night was at Jerry's, the restaurant I frequent. I had tried dating over the years, mainly with guys that trusted friends set me up with. Kyle must have seen me on a date once. As his messages became enraged, he threatened to kill any man that touched me. He said that he would get rid of anyone who got too close, and that I would never be with another man. I've changed my job, moved to new places, and even switched social media accounts multiple times. But nothing seems to stop him. He always finds a way back into my life. I am working with the police again, but I can't help but feel that nothing will stop him. So, if you're reading this and you've ever been in a relationship with someone who can't take no for an answer, please take it seriously. Obsession isn't love. It's dangerous. I didn't understand that at first. I thought time would make things better, but it only made it worse. Please, don't ignore red flags. Trust your instincts, and don't hesitate to ask for help when things get out of hand. You deserve peace. Stay safe out there. I met Leah a little over a year ago through some mutual friends. She was this amazing, funny, smart woman who seemed like the total package. We hit it off right away, and after a few weeks of casual dating, things turned into a real relationship. At first, everything was normal. We had a good time together, went on dates, and I was happy. But looking back, I can see the red flags I missed. After a few months, I started noticing Leah was a bit controlling. Not in an obvious way at first, but the little things added up. She would ask me where I was constantly, even when I was with friends. I'd get 3 or 4 texts in a row if I didn't respond within an hour. At first, I thought it was cute, like she was just thinking of me. But as time went on, it started to feel more suffocating. She started showing up unannounced, not just at my place, but at my friends' houses too. If I was out for a drink with my buddies, she'd show up, sometimes even without texting me first. If I went out of town for work, I'd get a text saying, "I'm here at your apartment, just making sure everything's okay." She claimed it was no big deal, but I wasn't okay with it. I mentioned it a couple of times, but she brushed it off, saying she was just looking out for me. I broke up with her after 6 months. It wasn't that she was a bad person, but I couldn't breathe anymore. I felt like she was trying to control my life, and that wasn't something I wanted. When I ended things, she cried and begged me not to, but I stuck to my decision. I thought I'd be fine. Here's where the insanity begins. A few weeks after we broke up, I started getting texts from Leah. At first, they were just, "I miss you," and "Why did we end things?" I didn't respond, but then the tone shifted. The texts went from sad and regretful to angry and spiteful. She started saying things like, "You will never find someone else like me. You're gonna regret leaving." I ignored it, hoping she'd just move on. But then, the real creepy stuff started. I was getting up to go to work one morning, and I saw something on my windshield. It was a note, a handwritten note, folded neatly and tucked under the wiper blade. It read, "I'm watching you." I thought it was a prank, but the next day, I found another note. This one said, "I see you. You're not safe." And there was a small drawing of a heart with an arrow through it. I felt this weird, cold knot in my stomach. I thought maybe someone was just messing with me. Until the next week. One evening I came home from work, and my door was cracked open. I froze. I thought maybe I'd just forgotten to lock it. But when I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. Things were out of place. My couch cushions had been rearranged. Some of my clothes had been moved around in my bedroom. The worst part, I found a photograph of me, taken while I was out getting groceries. It was a picture of me walking out of the store, looking completely unaware. It was taken from across the street. That's when I knew she was stalking me. I don't know how she managed to get into my apartment. I had security in my building, and no one should have been able to just walk in. But it wasn't just the apartment. It was my life. She knew things I hadn't told her. She knew where I went grocery shopping, where I hung out, where I worked. It felt like she was everywhere. I tried to go to the police, but they told me there wasn't much they could do unless something worse happened. So I did what I thought would work. I blocked her on everything. Social media, my phone, email, everything. She started showing up at places where I would go. The gym, the bar, my favorite pizza place. I'd walk in and she'd be sitting there, staring at me. The first time I saw her at the gym, I froze. I tried to avoid eye contact, but she just smiled at me like nothing was wrong. She said, "I'm just here to get some exercise too," as if everything was normal. I thought maybe if I confronted her, she'd get the hint. So I called her one day, and when she picked up, I said, "Leah, what the hell is wrong with you? You need to leave me alone. This is beyond creepy." Her response, "You're mine, and you'll always be mine. I'm not going anywhere." I immediately hung up and called the police, but when they showed up, Leah was gone. They couldn't do anything at this point. No evidence, no physical threats. It was just harassment, but harassment that was driving me mad. Then, things escalated. I started receiving packages, small things at first, a stuffed animal, a box of my favorite candy. Then, things started to get more disturbing. A few weeks later, I got a small, dirty bag with a lock of my hair inside. The note with it just said, "It's your turn to love me again." I was done. That was my breaking point. I filed for a restraining order, and thankfully, it was granted. But even after that, she didn't stop. The last time I saw her, I was coming home late at night, and I noticed someone standing across the street, watching me. I couldn't make out the face at first, but as I walked closer, I saw her, Leah, standing under a streetlight, staring directly at me. I froze. I thought she was going to come at me or try something violent, but she just smiled. That sick, twisted smile I'll never forget. "I'll always be watching you," she said, and then she just walked away. After that, I packed up my life and moved. I switched phone numbers, changed my email, and got a new job in a different city. It's been a few months now, and I haven't heard from her in a while. But the fear still lingers. I still double-check my locks every night. I still look over my shoulder when I'm out in public. I don't think I'll ever fully feel safe again. And the worst part, I know she's still out there. She's obsessed with me. And I'll never know what she's capable of. So, if you're reading this and something feels off about an ex, listen to your gut. If they're showing up when they're not welcome, if they're sending messages that make your skin crawl, take action immediately. Don't wait like I did. It might save you from something a lot worse. Stay safe, guys. I'm a 29-year-old female, and my partner is a 23-year-old female. We're back in her hometown, visiting her family for about a week. It is a very small, isolated town in the middle of nowhere, and basically in the middle of the woods. While we were here, she wanted to meet up with an old high school friend who still lives in the area, Kyle. So we meet Kyle at the beach, and right away he's acting really weird, making jokes about having a three-way with us, and just making a bunch of unwelcome, overly sexual, gross comments about us. Obviously, we're unfortunately used to this stuff to a certain extent, but coming from someone who was supposed to be her good friend, it was extra annoying. So, my girlfriend and I are shooting each other panicked looks the whole time. Once he's out of earshot for a second, she says that she's sorry, that he's never been like this before, and we can make an excuse to leave. When he comes back, we tell him we want to get dinner at a local bar, but he just asks to join us. We felt awkward, so we ended up saying yes. He says he doesn't know quite how to get there, so he follows us. We get there, order drinks and food, and then head out to the patio with the drinks. He makes a few more gross comments, but is generally being way more cool and normal than he was at the beach. We're smoking weed on the patio and chilling. The food comes quick, and we finish it quicker. Now, here's where it gets really messed up. So halfway through my first drink, I'm feeling really tired, which makes sense as we've had a long day. I give my girlfriend the signal that I want to go. She makes an excuse that we need to go. He keeps trying to get us to come to his house. I've got good weed and the dabs there, and you can meet my cats. Blah, blah, blah. He's being really pushy. We keep saying no and making excuses. We need to check on her grandpa and stuff like that. So we finally get in the car and say goodnight. We've parked next to each other and walk up and into the cars together while saying our goodbyes. When we get in the car, my girlfriend informs me that she wants to stay at the bar, but fake like we were leaving because she doesn't want to chill with him anymore, understandably. So we're sitting in the car, waiting for him to leave first. When he signals for us to roll down the window, we do. He says his GPS is being funny, and if we could lead him to the main road. To be fair, we are in the middle of nowhere, so this didn't seem too outlandish. so obviously staying behind at the bar was out. So in the car, we're talking about how pushy he was being, and she admitted she feels weird driving right back to her grandpa's house, so we should drive into town until we lose him. He's behind us for a long time, even way after he should have gotten off on his exit. We think it's weird, but weren't sure what to do. We finally get on a 2-lane road, and he pulls up next to us, and he's waving a phone, which is clearly my girlfriend's phone, in the window. We pull over. He gives her her phone back, chats for just a few seconds, then leaves in a hurry. Here's the part that makes my skin crawl. We know she had her phone. I saw her put it in her fanny pack, which was on the table, along with my phone and her weed. A few minutes before we left the bar, as we were preparing to leave, she didn't take it back out. There's literally no way she could have left it at the bar. More importantly, he got in his car and left the bar at the same time as us, meaning he had to have already had the phone when we were leaving. It's not like we left the bar first and he saw it on the table or something. He literally had to have been walking to the cars with us and calmly saying goodnight with the phone already in his possession. Now, the kicker, apparently, unbeknownst to me, my girlfriend had tasted a very weird, bitter taste in her straw at the bar, and was already suspicious, especially with how he'd been acting. This is why she wanted to stay back at the bar to get away from him, and stay in public where she felt it was safer. So when he walked up to the car to return her cell phone, she very casually and deliberately flashed the knife that she kept for protection in her jacket. I didn't know at the time that she'd done this, so that's why he'd left so quickly. Obviously, I was annoyed with her for not telling me her suspicions sooner, but she just didn't want me to panic. I'm really shaken up. A few things are clear. Number one, he stole my girlfriend's phone, and it seems like he did so that we would be forced to pull over on a dark road in the middle of nowhere. Number two, he quickly ended the conversation and left when my girlfriend flashed her knife. They've been good friends for almost 10 years. If he wasn't planning on doing something malicious, I feel like he would have acted confused about the knife, or said something like, why the fuck would you flash a knife at me? What is this, a bad movie? Or something like that. But instead, he just booked it, which tells me he knew exactly what she was doing, reacting to a threat and preparing to protect herself and me. Number three, he probably spiked our drinks. My girlfriend noticed a weird taste in her straw right away and chose not to finish her drink. I finished half of my drink and felt very tired. A few more things. I just don't know how he managed to nab the phone without us knowing or noticing. It doesn't really make sense, but he did. My girlfriend and I both remember her putting it in her fanny pack perfectly. We also have no idea how he could have spiked our drinks, unless he was working with the bartender, but we were the ones who suggested that bar. I don't know exactly how he did it, but I think I know why. And for that reason, my girlfriend's now ex-friend, who made creepy sexual comments, probably tried to drug us and stole her phone in order to get us alone on a dark road. Let's not meet again. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story you'd like me to read on the channel, please send me an email or post it to my subreddit. You can find details of this in the video description. It's the stories that make this, and this is the best way to ensure variety in the stories I share. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my channel members and patrons who now have special access to ad-free videos and other behind-the-scenes content. Once again, thank you guys for listening. Have a great night.